So for a period of 2 years, my online business was very profitable. And then out of nowhere, it all vanished. We pretty much had our revenues go down to zero. And not only did I start losing money every single month, but I even had to let go of all of my staff. And it's funny because in social media, everyone wants to make it sound as though they're crushing it, especially in the entrepreneurship game, that you're driving fast cars, closing tons of deals. But for every success that you see on Instagram, on Facebook, is a failure story that you do not see, that people do not tell you. But that's bullshit. So today I actually want to be just super real with you guys. The mistakes that led to the downfall of my business and what I'm actually trying to do right now to revive everything, to bring my company back to where it used to be and potentially even beyond. So I promise that if you're an entrepreneur, the things that you're going to be hearing in today's video will be more important than almost any other how-to video that you might see on YouTube. So that being said, yeah, let me share a little bit. How did we actually get here? In 2019, I quit my 9-to-5 job to start my own consulting business. Within 6 months, I was already making over 10K per month. And within a year, I was actually doing over $50,000 of revenue per month. But there are things that were coming on the horizon that were going to just ruin everything. So let me actually share them with you. Now, problem number one was that my lead flow was starting to dry up. At the time, I was really reliant on LinkedIn outreach. I was also really leaning on my Facebook group where I was sharing content and DMing people. And both of those things were starting to actually dry up. LinkedIn changed a lot of its rules where you couldn't send out as many cold messages. And then the Facebook algorithm just changed. And overnight, the content that used to get me hundreds and hundreds of likes and comments seemed to get essentially no engagement. And those were my two revenue streams. That's how I generated sales calls. So over the course of like a couple months, my sales calls went from being 15 to 20 a week down to 3 to 5 a week. And yeah, like at that point, I was literally losing money every single month. The major lesson that I had was that in the world of digital marketing, things change super, super fast because this is the most sophisticated market and things will change faster here than in almost any other industry. What I really learned was that you have to innovate because something that might work in say January, by the time March rolls around, yeah, things probably have changed. And my mistake was that I thought that I found a marketing channel which would continuously generate me more and more leads and that it would stick around forever. But the reality was the clock was ticking as soon as I even found that the channel worked in the first place. And that's the case with all things online, right? If you think about Facebook ads, even in 2015, Facebook ads actually were very easy to monetize and generate massive ROI on. These days, with the amount of competition, with the fact that Apple has pretty much made it really hard to track, Facebook ads is just really, really hard to successfully monetize. So overall, don't fall in love with what works today, and certainly don't think that just because you found some sort of golden egg that works, that it's gonna stick around for you in 3 to 6 months. You always have to be innovating and thinking about ways to even improve what you're already doing now. All right, so problem number two was that my offer simply was not good enough. At first, when my revenue started to decline, I thought it was purely a lead gen problem, as I was kind of referencing before. But the reality is that I actually tried to implement a couple different channels, such as paid traffic or Instagram, but none of those things really worked well. And eventually, I actually realized that the issue wasn't strictly just my lead generation or my marketing channels. It was actually the fact that my offer itself was a bit saturated. You can be the best salesperson or marketer ever, but if the actual thing that you're trying to sell is commoditized, if 100 other people are selling it at the same time and they're marketing it in the same way, you're always gonna have an uphill battle. Peter Thiel, one of the most successful billionaire tech investors of all time, he said, competition is for losers. He would rather be the first Indian restaurant in the block than to be the 10th Chinese restaurant on the block. And it's the same thing, right? I was great at sales and marketing, yet so many people started to sell what I was selling that it became infinitely harder for me to actually be able to move my product. And when I reflect back in early 2019, 2020, my business and my offers were actually fairly unique. But by the time 2021 and 2022 rolled around, so many people caught on to what I was doing that so many different competitors popped up selling almost the exact same thing. What mattered was the fact that the market now just perceived me as yet another sales and marketing consultant. So the second major lesson really is that the offer itself matters a ton, arguably more than your sales and marketing processes. And when I realized this, I actually pivoted my business and added new product lines, which I thought the market needed, something that the market didn't already have. So what I did was I started helping people with hiring and training their sales team for them. And this was something that people really, really needed because frankly, not many people know how to build sales teams. And in the same way, not many people were doing it because the barriers to entry were much higher, right? To learn how to actually hire and train salespeople, not only is that a more complicated skill set, but it also requires a lot more operationally heavy processes, right? I needed to have a hiring manager, I needed to be able to conduct interviews, I needed to have a sales coach on staff. There was just so much more that went into it compared to my old business. Anyone can start a coaching business tomorrow, but could you make a competitor to SpaceX or Tesla? Of course not. And the more complexity is in the business, the harder it is for competitors to pop up, which actually makes it easier for you to differentiate competitively in the market. So over the course of 6 months, I actually built this new hiring and training of sales rep product for my clients, hired a bunch of new people, and I was able to actually get my business back to around $30,000 to $50,000 of revenue per month. Now, the downside of building this more complex business is that actually fulfilling and keeping your clients happy is much harder, but the upside is that when you are able to do that, it really sets yourself apart. And the reality is, if you stick to businesses that are inherently easy to fulfill for, you're always going to have the issue of new competitors coming in, doing the same thing. And then every 3 months, you're dealing with this like existential crisis of, is my business gonna survive? You're picking your own level of hard. Whether you're picking a really easy business to start, but it's hard to compete with other people, or you're just picking a really difficult business to build, but once you build it, it's easy because there's very little competition. At the end of the day, both is difficult. So you get to decide which type of difficult you prefer. And for me, I think it's pretty clear the type of difficult that I prefer is the one where I'm just different and innovating. Now, the third problem that I had was that my emotional state as I was going through all of this turmoil was broken. My mental state was like not in a healthy place when all this was happening. And you hear a lot about blessings in disguises, right? Where things seem kind of shitty at first, but then you realize months or years down the line, oh, you know what? That shitty event was really good for me. But what you don't hear about as much are curses in disguise, where it's kind of like the opposite, where things that you initially thought were really, really great, you realize a year down the line, you know what, maybe that wasn't actually so good for me at all. And that's kind of what happened to me, because when I first started my business, success came really, really easy. Just like I had said, within a couple months, I was making 10K a month. Within a year, I was doing 50K a month. And when that was happening, it seemed like I was on top of the world. But the issue was that it gave me poor expectations of how hard business was meant to be. Because when adversity came around and I started to fail, I had never experienced it before. I didn't really know how to react to the failure. And after a couple months of trying to solve the problems and I was continuously failing to fix them, I just went into this deep depressive episode. And at the deepest, darkest part of my hole, I just kind of coped with like casual sex, drugs, and partying. I pretty much just told myself, you know what? I don't want to work anymore. Business isn't even really that important to me. I'd rather just have a fun time. And all of this was just me lying to myself because I didn't want to confront the reality, which was, yeah, my business is failing and I do care about it, but I don't want to look at it in the face because whenever I do, it just reminds me of how big of a failure I was. Another thing that I was thinking about was just, will my peers and my friends accept me? Because over the course of those 3 years of building my company, my friend group and the people that I was starting to socialize with became predominantly entrepreneurs. I was so embarrassed, like, could I really come to them and tell them, like, my business is going under? Would they accept me? Would they still want to be my friend? And even myself, right? Like, over the course of those couple years, my identity, the way that I started seeing myself as a human being was that of a CEO, of a business owner, of a successful entrepreneur. And a lot of my confidence even came from that. And when I no longer could tell myself that I was those things because my business was falling apart, my identity was like disappearing. I didn't even know who I was anymore as a human being, which was like so bizarre and so crushing to my overall sense of self-worth and confidence. It's hard for me to even think about that. And yeah, my ego couldn't take it. I was embarrassed. And then I actually withdrew. There were months where I pretty much didn't interact with anyone. But overall, now that I reflect back to that entire time in my life, I can actually say that this failure in and of itself, that was a blessing in disguise. Maybe my early success was a curse in disguise, but certainly this failure was a blessing in disguise. Because in the moment, it was the worst thing in the world. But now that I'm almost through it, I've learned to become more resilient, that a lot of the skills that I had when I built my business, I was able to translate into other ventures that would allow me to come back and find new avenues and new ways for me to succeed. It taught me that it's okay to be vulnerable. Truthfully, a year and a half ago, I wouldn't have been able to record this video because I would have been too embarrassed to share any of this. But I actually had a bit of a mental breakdown and a panic attack, and it forced me to actually talk to my friends and even my therapist about what I was going through. And the cool thing was, as soon as I was willing to share about these hardships and these failures, that was when I started to realize, oh wow, my friends have actually gone through this as well. And they're not judging me for this. They're supporting me. They're helping me learn about how to deal with failure. The thing is, I was keeping all these fears and anxieties to myself when the exact people who could have helped me were the people that were already in my life, and I just needed to be brave enough to tell them. And it's funny because a lot of them were telling me that, hey Lloyd, like, we want to help and we can help, but we can't help unless you at least tell us that there's something going on. right? And that was something that I was avoiding for far too long. And truthfully, a big part of why I even wanted to build a business in the first place was just because I needed a way to validate my crippling insecurity. I'm gonna be super vulnerable here, but I was bullied as a kid. I had a lot of anxiety and social confidence issues. As I grew up in my mid-20s and beyond, a big part of why I wanted to get in shape or make a lot of money or travel was because I had this chip on my shoulder. I needed to prove to the world that I had value. A lot of that drive that I had from that insecurity did, in fact, lead me to success, but it didn't actually lead me to being happy or fulfilled. And yes, all that motivated the hell out of me. It fueled my drive and my discipline and my work ethic, and ultimately, I was able to achieve a lot of those more tangible goals, right? But deep inside, I was still very much that loser kid. And I was like relying upon this outward success for me to feel as though I wasn't this loser kid. But as soon as my success went away, my business collapsed. I wasn't making as much money. I wasn't traveling as much anymore. All that was left was still that loser kid. And I realized, you know what? The money and the success, that never actually fixed my core underlying lack of confidence. I'm actually very grateful that I went through that failure, because if I didn't, I would have never realized that, you know what, confidence can't come from my external success. It needs to come from just me realizing that as a human being, I have value, I have self-worth. And it's amazing because the last 6 months or so, I really started to get deeper into spirituality. I spent some time in Thailand to meditate, spending some time in temples with Buddhist monks, really getting deeper into just learning about myself and even dabbling with some psychedelics to understand myself better. And I'm not necessarily recommending or telling you guys that you need to move yourself to Thailand, hang out with monks, or do mushrooms. Not at all, but I think it's really important that you just spend the time to realize that, you know what, you have a lot of value as a human being. You don't really need to make a ton of money for you to be valid, right? And the nice thing is, now that I have this higher degree of self-confidence and self-esteem, I'm going back into building my company now without a chip on my shoulder. I'm not doing it because I need to become rich. I'm not doing it to try to prove to myself that I'm worthwhile. I'm doing it because I enjoy it. Inherently, the reason why I like business is not because of the money that it earns me, but it's actually because of the fact that it's fun. I like building systems. I like being able to create impact for my clients. The most fond memories I actually have of my business is whenever my clients have come to me and said, wow, this thing that you taught me has really changed my life. It's really made a difference. That has been more impactful for me than any time I've been able to break a revenue milestone or some sort of monetary record for myself. As well, I just love the fact that I get to meet so many cool people in my journey as being an entrepreneur, and I get to constantly learn new skills. I feel as though these last 3 years have been the longest 3 years of my life, while also having been the fastest 3 years of my life, right? And the reason why is because I'm exposing myself to so many different new things, new skills, new opportunities, that every day is always exciting. Whereas when I compare my life working that 9 to 5, every year felt like it flew by, not because it was fun, but because nothing had changed. December 31st would roll around and I would reflect, is like, did anything interesting at all happen this year? And the answer was always no. It always felt as though, you know what, I am the exact same person as I was 365 days ago. And that was like a terrible feeling. And that's really what I love about entrepreneurship. It pushes me and it teaches me new things and it challenges me, and that's why I love it. So what are my next steps? Truth is, a lot of what I shared was really recent. I want to continue doubling down in content. YouTube is an amazing way for me to share not just tactical advice, but also just some of these more deeper, more vulnerable feelings that I've gotten from my years of being an entrepreneur. And yeah, I just want to continue innovating and building great products and providing amazing experience for my clients. So if you've actually gone through failure in your own business, please share your experience below. I really want to be able to connect with this community on a deeper level. And these are really the things that connect us as human beings, right? And if you haven't already, please hit that notification bell as well, subscribe. I'm going to be trying to release a ton more content that's going to be valuable for you, and it would be amazing if you could be there with me alongside this journey. So that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for paying attention and listening to my story, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.